I tell you, it was one thing for them to say we only have 12 years to live, or I guess it's 11 and a half years now because they've been saying that for a while. But to literally trot out children saying we are going to die, it's time to panic. It makes me deeply uncomfortable that they're talking that way with children, to children, by children. I think that's super gross.
Yeah, in fact, the school strikes, which recently came to the United States on March 15th, started in Europe. Actually, the Swedish girl who started it, Greta Thunberg, who's now 16, has been striking every Friday, skipping school. And the gist of it is she's now been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, a Nobel Prize for activism, whatever. But she has said, why should children be going to school when the best scientists in the world tell us our future will be no more unless government does something about the climate? Yeah. So the leader of the school strike movement has the exact same message as the 9-year-old you just played there.
Yeah, we showed some of that European young lady. I guess she's a teenager now. She's got I don't want to be mean because kids look how they look, but I think she's really worked on looking like she reminds me of children in horror shows, children who look like they should be having fun and who are really cute and have pigtails and should be laughing and maybe even playing with dolls. She has this, I don't want to say satanic look because I'm not accusing her of anything. I'm just saying she's really worked on that shocking contrast between a young girl who should be happy and go lucky and someone who literally is saying, I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear that I feel. We played some of her clips at length last week. It was really creepy. You say she's 16. I think she's deliberately trying to look like a younger girl by dressing in pigtails and really young. She's trying to keep that 11, 12-year-old vibe. Again, that's something a little weird too. I just think let kids be kids, but let's switch away from those. I just want to show that weirdness because that's the new CBC propaganda I want to tell you, Mark. But what is the truth? I remember when I wrote my book, Fight Kyoto, about a decade or so ago, I did learn that where the world is warming very, very slightly and slowly, it's where you would want it to warm the most. The Arctic at night, for example. So instead of being minus 20, it's minus 15. How's that not a good thing? I mean, first of all, is it true that the Arctic is very slightly warming, and is it true that the glaciers are retreating? These are two of the lines we've heard recently by Catherine McKenna.
Well, actually, I'll take both separately. First of all, the Associated Press here in America is hyping a story, and there's a big press release, and it's from several different universities, but it's specifically on the Arctic. And what they did is they picked 1970s as a baseline for the temperatures. And they said, looking at all these different lines, temperature, ice, everything, there's been this warming in the Arctic. And if these trends continue, and they come up with like catastrophe. But what they've done is the classic thing that the George Soros funded group is doing to TV weathermen. Every chart that they have starts in the 1960s or 70s. Usually it's around 1970 because that's the best starting point right during the height of the global cooling scare. So what they do is they pick a very cold period. And of course, we've warmed since the global ice age scare of the 1970s. So what they've done with this Arctic study is they've come up and so, yes, it has warmed. So the media now is hyping that the Arctic has done this and that. Interestingly enough, one of the scientists in the study may have forgotten what his name was, Igor Polyakov, if I'm probably butchering his last name. But in 2003, he did a study showing that the Arctic was warmer in the 1930s and up to 1940 than it was at the end of the 20th century. So it all depends on time scales and projections. They pick a very cold period to start, they find a warming period, and then they go at that rate and they project 100, 150 years in the future, and they try to come up with very scary scenarios. You asked me about glaciers, same scenario there. They started this study in the 1960s, and to study at a University of Zurich, and their summation is, look at all this, more ice has been melting since the 60s when it was much colder, number one. And number two, it's melting at much faster rates than we thought. What's left out of the story was the actual data, and what's left out of the press release. At my website, Climate Depot, I linked to climate analyst Paul Homewood, who ran the numbers. Even this new study from University of Zurich, which your own Canadian government is pointing to as proof that it's worse than we thought, It's 2 inches of sea level rise in 100 years. That's what they're talking about. But they'd much rather talk about tons of ice and all these other numbers that no one has any perspective on. But people can get their heads around 2 inches a century difference in sea level rise, which is not even noticeable. And to give people an idea, over the last half of the 20th century, sea level rose about 5 inches, and you can't even tell that. There's no way to actually realize that it changed. So these are 2 different studies dealing with that. But you see some of the tricks. Pick a cold baseline, and then come up with warming equals mankind somehow as causation, and then come up with extrapolating on the future and even enhance those, it's even going to accelerate into the future. This is how it's done, and then put children out to scare people, and voila, you have your, the whole recipe for what they've been doing for the last several decades in the global warming debate.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.